اسمحوا لي أن أرحب بدكتور أوليفر مارتن ودكتور منير بشناقي ودكتور جيهان زكي وسعادة السيدة منال عطايا في الجلسة الأخيرة التي سنتحدث بها عن الدبلوماسية الثقافية أو عن الآخر. وهناك سنجد وسنشاهد الآن رؤى وتجارب في التفاعل العالمي وأهمية الحوار بين الحضارات لإبراز المعاني أو الرسائل التي تحملها الثقافة أو التراث الثقافي في سياقات ثقافية مختلفة. We will move now to English. رح نتحول للإنجليزي وسأرحب I want to welcome our chairperson of council, Dr. Oliver Martin. That is the Council of ICCRAM, of course. And we are pleased to have Dr. Oliver with us today. And I would like to say that he obtained a master's degree in architecture in 1998 from the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. And he pursued his studies with a PhD in technical sciences and history of architecture at the ETHZ until 2002. He held several positions at the Swiss Federal Office of Culture until he joined the management board in 2012 as head of section of cultural heritage and historic monuments in Switzerland. In parallel, he acted as an expert member of the Swiss delegation to UNESCO World Heritage Committee from 2010 to 2013. Dr. Oliver Martin, we're very pleased and honored to have you with us here as a chairperson of council, but also as an expert who have experience in this field and especially working on the international level. So, Dr. Oliver, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Zaki, and thank you all. I just want to tell you that I'm very happy to be with you today, and as chair of ICCRAM Council, the exchange and the discussion, particularly with the Arab region, matters a lot to me, and if even today it can only be virtual. First of all, I'd like to focus a little bit the concept of cultural diplomacy, and of course I will do that from a perspective outside of the Arab region. An ambassador once told me that diplomacy is all about interests. To get a maximum of what you want, she said, you just have to know your partner, you have to know his main interests, his red lines and his no-goes, and then you will have a great success in negotiation. Cultural diplomacy for me, however, is a more multifaceted field, and it goes far beyond, I believe, of particular national interests and getting the maximum out of the situation. And I like to distinguish in my presentation two aspects of cultural diplomacy. The first is the promotion of cultural initiatives to foster mutual understanding, while the second is the maybe more normative work for which we, the heritage professionals, have also a major role to play. And of course, knowing each other remains a key aspect of cultural diplomacy. In the first sense, cultural diplomacy is often said to be soft power. The meaning is that in the field of culture, and that is also cultural heritage, but together with arts, film, living traditions, also cuisine, the access to other countries is easy and somehow friendly, and that by passing through culture, a basis of mutual understanding could be built with the others, and particularly well. And this is certainly true. Getting to know the other, the so-called stranger, in a direct and authentic, true way by sharing its culture, creates an inspiring and informal access, improves the understanding, and contributes in this way, without any doubt, to overcome an eventually existing prejudice. The aim of this type of cultural diplomacy is to ease dialogue and sometimes indeed to become friends. It's a kind of a door opener, and we all know that. Once you had a positive experience with a foreign culture, you will have another approach to this culture and the people coming from there. And as many other countries, Switzerland is fostering this kind of exchange. There are a couple of Swiss institutes and Swiss cultural centers in the world. Swiss embassies organize exhibitions, conferences, and Swiss artists get scholarships to work in other countries. We do also have a series of Swiss schools in most of the regions of the world. And students of these schools are foreigners by majority, so not Swiss citizens, which helps Switzerland to raise visibility and create a lifelong access to Switzerland for the students, and thus, and this is indeed a goal, long-lasting goodwill towards the Swiss way of doing. And I think that these efforts of soft cultural diplomacy are most important. And needless to say that the access to the other must be direct. And we've heard many interesting discourses yesterday on the term of authenticity. And I think there's these communication between us and the others in this way must be authentic and not the result of a public relation campaign, or even worse, just a blunt propaganda. And yet, I believe we shouldn't see cultural diplomacy only in that way, that risks to consider culture somehow reductively as only soft and informal. Culture is not nice to have. It should be taken center stage. It shouldn't be reduced to being a good way for easier achieving hard geopolitical or economic goals. I believe that considering cultural diplomacy as soft power only may misjudge the role and the importance of culture. And in other words, culture, ladies and gentlemen, is hard stuff too. In our times, the increasing political significance of culture becomes particularly evident, I think, and in a world that seems to live a period of crisis. We are facing today unprecedented challenges. There's, of course, the actual COVID-19 pandemic, but there's also an enormous lack of environmental protection leading to climate change and dramatic loss of biodiversity. There are social inequalities and uncontrolled globalization risks to leave many people behind. Enormous new corporate powers are emerging we will have to deal with, and we assist to a series of ongoing open conflicts leading to incredible human suffering and humanitarian catastrophes. We can observe a very concerning rise of populism in many parts of the world, and increasing religious and ideological fanaticisms of different colors make people suffer. In such a world, culture is no longer to be considered something like an accompanying measure only. And besides, of course, culture too has a huge economic impact. In many countries, the cultural sector is contributing in an essential way to the economy, and cultural tourism is a pillar of many national economies. The current pandemic dramatically makes this clear to us. But culture is hard stuff not only because it makes money. Culture is also an essential non-monetary resource for society. And an individual cultural self-fulfillment contributes to the well-being of people. The possibility to experience and to live our individual cultures, and here is very important to use the plural, is thus an important vector for social cohesion and an inclusive society. And everyone, independently of their origins, shall have the right of access to participation and enjoyment of culture while respecting and protecting diversity. And this then is inseparable from the achievement of human rights and fundamental freedoms. And in my view, this is second aspect of active cultural diplomacy is precisely to defend this universal role of culture beyond our nations and cherishing our diversity. To defend our cultures in this way, we need multilateral frameworks, and multilateralism is crucial for our work in the field of culture. Normative instruments are too, because culture, as I said, is hard stuff too. Conventions and treaties set the principles and definitions for cultural fulfillment. When states parties ratify these conventions and thus adhere and share their respective value, then this is a success of active cultural diplomacy. When state parties are members of intergovernmental organizations and invest public funds in these activities for the common good, then this is also a big success of cultural diplomacy. And here, I'd like to insist on the important role of us, of experts in cultural diplomacy. Exchange, knowledge sharing, support for each other, but also sharing of new experiences, reflecting other points of view, and the common development of new concepts and new global policies and frameworks is the engine for international cultural cooperation. And to quote an example in the field of cultural heritage, I believe that UNESCO's World Heritage Convention is one of the striking examples for such cooperation. Being today nearly universal, it has become the most successful international instrument for the protection of natural and cultural heritage. And we do all know that this success is also due to the synergy with the growing tourism industry. And of course, then again, we are talking about money also. But if we focus the cultural achievement of the convention, we must consider it as enormous. With the World Heritage Convention, nearly all countries on the world agree on the definition of cultural concepts like a monument or a site, cultural landscapes, authenticity and integrity. And nearly all countries of the world commit to protect and preserve more than 1,000 precious cultural sites. And it is important to note that since 1972, the concepts of the World Heritage Convention have been continuously developed further, and the originally very Western approach has been opened and amended to a more universally applicable tool. Yesterday, we heard a lot about the concept of authenticity and how it might be necessary to open it even further and to share it so that it fits for the whole world. And these are things that the experts have to do, because the balance of the World Heritage List still remains a concern, but also its credibility. And those are issues that cultural diplomacy has to tackle. And as I said, in large part, this work must be expertise-driven. Discussion of content, the common development of new cultural concepts, the ontological questions, or more specifically heritage conservation issues, are of enormous benefit when globally shared, discussed, and agreed on. And to do this, we need expertise and technical knowledge to be credible, effective, and innovative. And according to my own experience in World Heritage, Switzerland has always insisted on decision-making based on such a credible expertise and sticking to the rules. Being in this way considered somehow unflinching is sometimes demanding, and it might put you in a political minority, but hardly ever in a minority amongst heritage professionals, as most of the experts share the same commitment. Another example, of course, is ICCROM, as a small but very competitive intergovernmental organization that is for me a very privileged place for cultural cooperation and the development of cultural heritage policies. ICCROM stands for globally recognized outcomes committed to cultural values and the preservation of cultural heritage. And ICCROM is expertise-driven. Council of ICCROM is composed by experts who are acting in the interest of the organization, that means in the interest of heritage, and not necessarily defending the interest of their country. Also, the discussions and deliberations at the General Assembly of ICCROM's member states are mainly expertise-driven. And this is extraordinary. Many experts from national administrations have been representing their country with ICCROM for many years, and often we hear the very touching expressing of the ICCROM family. This creates easy dialogue between heritage experts, and this is not the same compared to negotiations between more political representatives of member states, as heritage conservation is the common and genuine main interest of all experts. No need to always agree on everything, of course, but the discussion is a technical one, and technically certainly not meant in a dispraised sense. Having said this, there is, of course, also the political aspect of cultural diplomacy. The international cultural agreements, and thus culture and cultural heritage, need to be discussed on political level to be acceptable for anyone and agreed on. The once agreed principles may be misused and politicized. Cultural values and cultural rights may be disrespected, and people may be harmed in the name of culture. Political conflicts may arise around cultural questions, and political solutions are then needed. And this part of the cultural diplomacy is usually the job of professional diplomats. Yes, they aren't under instructions, and those instructions should still keep culture and cultural values at center stage. In other words, I think that multilateral cultural diplomacy works well if the responsibilities are put where they must be. Of course, and unfortunately, in our realpolitik, this is not always the case. Technical questions and sometimes are politicized, or leads to biased conclusions and damages the credibility of decision-making and the multilateral bodies. The other way around, totally political questions are technicized and thus are compromised from the scratch as well. As chair of Council of ICCROM and coming from a small country, I see my mandate to support the organization to go forward to deliver best results, benefiting all its member states. I try to guide Council with adequate means of cultural diplomacy, always putting the interests of heritage and the organization in the center. My concern is to create an open and transparent ambience where all Council members feel at ease and contribute with their great experience and knowledge to the benefit of the organization. And maybe this is, after all, the most important aspect of cultural diplomacy. It's the human touch. Wherever we come from and whatever interests and views we have, we are all human beings, and talking to each other, treating each other with respect and holding up our cultural diversity is, and I strongly believe that, the real ground for all well-being. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Martin, for this introductory, I should say, for this session. It's a kind of a keynote speech, in a way, for the cultural diplomacy. I think your call for expertise and expert-driven work in this area is quite important. I don't want to take much time because we are really behind the time. And I want to ask again kindly all our upcoming experts and friends to make the presentations as short as 10 minutes as possible. So I am very honored and pleased to introduce our former Director General of ICROM, Mr. Munir Bouchnaqi. And I think I will move to Arabic now, if you don't mind. أرحب بدكتور منير بوشناقي لوجوده معنا، فنحن متشرفين بوجوده اليوم. أود أن أقول أن دكتور منير بوشناقي جاء تعيينه في إكرم في عام 2006 بعد مسيرة مهنية طويلة في منظمة اليونسكو، حيث شغل منصب المدير العام المساعد للثقافة من نهاية 1999 إلى أن استلم الإكرم في 2006. سابقا لذلك كان دكتور بوشناقي مديرا لقسم التراث الثقافي ومديرا لمركز التراث العالمي، وفي بلده الجزائر كان مديرا للآثار والمتاحف والمواقع التاريخية. حصل دكتور بوشناقي على الدكتوراه في علم الآثار والتاريخ القديم من جامعة أكسون-بروفانس بفرنسا، ونشر عددا من الكتب عن التراث الثقافي في الجزائر واليونسكو، وكتابه الأخير الذي صدر في 2017 بعنوان التراث المشوه هو كتاب مهم، إن دل على شيء يدل على خبرته الواسعة في هذا المجال. وساهم في أربع سنوات من 2013 ل 2017 بإطلاق المركز العربي للتراث العالمي كمركز الفئة الثانية في مملكة البحرين مع معالي الشيخة مي الخليفة. دكتور بوشناقي، تفضل في إلقاء العرض.
شكرا جزيلا دكتور زكي، وهنيئا على هذه المبادرة الطيبة في الشارقة وإكرام الشارقة. طبعا في 10 دقائق كثير صعب إلي أن نتكلم على تجربة في اليونسكو وفي الإكرام في مجال الدبلوماسية الثقافية. So let me allow me to speak English in continuation of our president of ICROM, Dr. Martin Oliver, to say that even the place where this meeting is starting and this initiative that has been done from ICROM Sharjah is the result of cultural diplomacy. And I would like to remind those who are around this table that with Zaki, I don't know how many trips we did from Rome to Sharjah, and we had a very good approach and also a very good welcome from His Highness Sheikh Sultan Al-Qasimi when Italian government could not continue to support financial extra budgetary resources to train young experts in the Arab countries. And this was really a very, very good opening from a leader, from His Highness, the fact that also the Emirates entered ICROM and then agreed to have a regional center for the Arab region that is giving such an important result. In 10 minutes, I cannot summarize a life in the field of cultural heritage, where I was, of course, confronted with a number of issues. And I'd like to go very quickly to, is it going? To share the screen, it's okay, but I didn't see it. Okay, so very quickly, I think that I would present to you two examples of very, very serious and sometimes difficult situation that UNESCO was faced with. And of course, here I shared very often this view with my dear friend Amra Adzimohamedovic in the first example in Mostar. As you know, the bridge was collapsed in Mostar on November 1993. It was really in a very, very bad situation after the war, but not only the bridge, all the surrounding of the old city of Mostar. And at that time, the Director General of UNESCO, but also before the Director General Mayor, made statements about the importance of be present in Mostar. And I just, give the quoting Director General Koichiro Matsuura: "We are present in Mostar to breathe new life into an exceptional heritage that needs, after being used as a target, to become a sign of mobilization, a sign of recognition, and a strong symbol of multi-identity based on mutual trust." And this is what we try to do with our colleagues in Sarajevo from the Department of Heritage, but also with the municipality of Mostar. And I just want to remember everybody here that there were two municipalities after the war in 1994, Mostar East, Mostar West, but the only point of agreement when I was sent, to discuss what UNESCO could do after all these destructions, the point of consensus was the bridge of Mostar should be rebuilt. It is a long technical story. I don't have time to enter into the details, but we organized at UNESCO an international expert committee, and we followed with our colleagues in Bosnia-Herzegovina the steps of the reconstruction of the bridge, which was asked by the population of Mostar to be in the like the philosophy of Cesare Brandi, com'era dov'era. So exactly the same bridge with the same shape, and if possible, with authenticity of material. The authenticity of material, we tried very hard to, first of all, obtain the collaboration of the Hungarian army, and the divers of the army recuperated a lot of original stones from the bridge. In addition, the expert in Bosnia-Herzegovina and some specialists from abroad helped cutting the remaining stone in the same quarry which was used by the architect Miamar Hajruddin, famous architect, student of Sinan in the 16th century. And at the end, the bridge was rebuilt exactly as it was, with the same shape. But we have had a lot of discussion at the World Heritage Committee for the proposal of inscription of the site. And I remember I had, during the committee in South Africa, 2005, in Durban, we had a long discussion with colleagues about the authenticity, and in particular, I had personally a discussion with Christopher Young to explain that the authenticity here is not only a stone one, but it is also what these stones are representing for the population. And this is how we have seen after the, a long period of reconstruction, how the population, and this is a picture that I have taken during the day in July 2004, of all the population coming to see finally the bridge recuperated, restored, reconstructed. So it is both a reconstruction and a restoration, but it is also a project whereby archaeologists have found a very important numbers of new elements explaining the beginning of the building and giving the whole history of this bridge in Mostar. And finally, it was inscribed in Durban, as I said, and I remember I brought the certificate of inscription of the Mostar Bridge and its surrounding on after the agreement by the World Heritage Committee, as I said, after a long discussion. The second example I want to present to you is Tatarstan. Tatarstan is a republic inside Russia, inside the Russian Federation. And in this republic, we were asked as UNESCO to work on the presentation and submission of file concerning 3 sites: the Kremlin of Kazan, which is the capital of Tatarstan, the archaeological site of Bolgar, which is a very important archaeological site, and I will show you some pictures in a few moments, and the Ascension Cathedral and Monastery in Sviazk, in an island. The first inscription, which was done in Cairns in 2000, was about the Kremlin of Kazan. And here also a long discussion happened before and during the committee. Why? Because the question of authenticity is not fulfilled totally when you look at the site. You have, of course, this tower, which is original, and it's dating from the Mongol period. You have the church on the right, which has been restored, but which is the church dating from the 17th century. And you have also the mosque. And this mosque was reconstructed, and this was one of the subjects. Is the Kremlin of Kazan authentic with this new intervention? This was also another very important issue which was discussed. But what was the important element that we discussed and introduced into the various committees, and in particular with ICOMOS during the preparation of the file and during the evaluation of the file, is that in this city, in Kazan, this church and this mosque are at 150 meters one from the other. And this is a very important element of appreciation, particularly in our contemporary period, of the living together, of the knowing the culture of the other. Because here you have the two populations, the population of Tatar, which are a population in majority from Islamic culture, and you have the population of Russian citizens, in majority Orthodox. And here the value of this site is also this peaceful coexistence, peaceful admiration from one to the other. And the Kremlin of Kazan is becoming a very, very attractive destination for tourism from inside Russia, but also from outside Russia. And it's not a secret that Kazan is a candidate to receive the World Heritage Committee meeting of 2022. The second site, which was also a subject of long discussions, various meetings. I remember we had a first evaluation of ICOMOS, and then we had another mission where I was present together with Francesco Bandarin. He was ADG Culture, Assistant Director General for Culture. I was Director of ICCROM, and we went with the President of the European Association of Archaeologists to visit this site and to see again the difficult situation of having a site which was, let's say very honestly, it was heavily restored during the Soviet period, but we were explained when we were visiting this site that this Bolgar archaeological site is, first of all, the most Nordic installation of Islamic community with, of course, Islamic buildings with a totally different architecture, organization of the space that was existing in this area of Volga, and that this site is the result of a very important mission sent by the Abbasid Caliphate from Baghdad, going to the north, more than 2,500 kilometers to the north, in the vicinity of the river Volga, and there is an Islamic site with a mosque. You see here a picture that I have taken from helicopter, and also some mausoleums, but also a church which is totally, closed. So you have the church, you have the mosque in the same position, and you see that the buildings, the structure which are remaining, have been a kind of heavily consolidated. Why? I received the explanation. I was with another colleague who came with us, Mrs. Brita Rudolph from the ICOMOS committee, and we were explained on the spot that in this site, in winter, the temperature is going at 35 degrees below zero. On summer, it goes to 35, 40 degrees above zero. And that's why the structures are, not solid enough to support all these different temperatures during the year. And here, I can tell you who was the engine, the politician will coming from this man, the president of the Republic of Tatarstan, Mintimer Shaimiev. I was on mission there, and you can see on the right side the actual Secretary General of the Russian National Commission. On the left side, but we cannot see his face, the Secretary General of ICOMOS Russia. And here we are in front of a building where this president was saying, this is a building that we want to reconstruct, and it's a kind of what we call in Arabic a hammam. It's a bath of the 16th century with exactly the continuation of the Roman tradition with the hypocaust and with the cold room and the warm room, etc. And we had a long discussion on the spot. This is why I'm showing the picture here. We had a long discussion. You see, we were having the plans here, and I was explaining to the President of the Republic, this is not the kind of monuments that you can reconstruct. It has to remain as a testimony, and its authenticity is here. If you change it, then you lose the authenticity. The third example, I'm sorry, I have to go very quickly, is this island. This island is called Sviazk. And this island has a long history, sometimes terrible. It was the time when Stalin was sending prisoners in a terrible situation in a place which now is the Museum of Sviazk. And here we have among the very first churches, Orthodox churches, and one of the most important element of the Christianity is in Sviazk. So the president of Tatarstan wanted to have also a recognition at the international level of what is the other very important element of history and also of the identity of Tatarstan, which is a multiple identity, both Christian and Muslim. And finally, in Krakow in 2017, this site, the Monastery of the Assumption, was inscribed on the World Heritage List. This is, to conclude, I think this is exactly what I'm preparing with AMRA, a paper to show how the population on one side, because you know these countries during all the Soviet Union were completely closed. Bulgar, that we have seen a few moments ago, was considered by the Muslims in Soviet Union as Mecca, because they were not allowed to go to pilgrimage to Mecca in Saudi Arabia. And for them, Bulgar was becoming the Mecca for the Muslims. At the same time, because of the Stalinism, because of the fight from communism towards any religious buildings, also these monuments were in a very, very bad shape. I have pictures because I went to Tatarstan very often. And this is the result of the cultural diplomacy. I want to conclude in saying that this president was interested when I was telling him, you know, ICROM is the body dealing with the study for conservation, training people. And he said, I want to come to Rome to see ICROM. So he came to ICROM and he saw in the building of ICROM a map showing all the member states, and then a very big white. And he said, what is this? I said, this is Russia, Mr. President. But why it is white, the other are not the same color? Because Russia left ICROM during the time of Perestroika in 1991, and it didn't return up to now. He said, can you take a picture with me on this map? I took a picture with him. A few months later, he sent me a message with a letter saying, I saw President Putin. I told him about the importance of ICROM, and President Putin decided that Russia should return and should be again member of ICROM. This is very quickly, you know, my personal experience in the field of cultural diplomacy that is using, as Dr. Oliver just presented, using cultural heritage as a mean for understanding, as a mean for exchanging the knowledge, as a mean of appreciation of the other. And I think that this is something that we did in many other places, particularly in places where terrible crises arose, not only in Bosnia-Herzegovina, but I followed also the situation in Lebanon, in Iraq, in Cambodia, in Afghanistan. So I think that you are right to have put in this agenda the problem of cultural diplomacy linked with the major criteria of what all the experts yesterday were presenting, which means authenticity, respect for the place, what we call the genius loci, the spirit of the place. I think all these elements should be now represented and explained again to the communities and to the responsible authorities in the various countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Boshnaki, for an excellent presentation. I had the privilege to be with you at one point in September 2017 in Tatarstan, and there was a meeting on cultural dialogue and cultural diplomacy, which is really at the heart of the topic that we're addressing today. In fact, yes, I agree with you. In fact, the mutual understanding of why the site or these sites have, been, meaningful to different people, that what helped to list these important places on World Heritage. Thank you very much. And I move now to my dear colleague, Dr. Jehan Zaki. We're very happy to have you with us, Dr. Jehan, today. I don't know if I should move to English, to Arabic, or stay in English? Are you speaking English or Arabic, Dr. Jihan?
زكي سمعني؟
سامعك بالعربي.
العربي طبعا.
تمام. Okay. So we will move to Arabic. الدكتورة جيهان زكي هي واحدة من الوجوه النسائية العربية المتميزة التي استطاع نجمها في مجال الدبلوماسية الثقافية، وتألقت لمدة 7 سنوات في إدارة الأكاديمية المصرية للفنون بروما، وعملنا معها باستمرار لما كانت في روما، وهي مستشار ثقافي للسفارة المصرية لدى إيطاليا. تخرجت جيهان زكي من المدرسة الكاثوليكية بالقاهرة، ثم استكملت دراستها بجامعة حلوان، وعينت عضو هيئة تدريس، وابتعثتها للحكومة المصرية للحصول على شهادة الدكتوراه في علوم المصريات من جامعة ليون بفرنسا. وفي عام 2014 حصلت على الدبلوم المتخصص في مجال الدبلوماسية الثقافية من جامعة سيينا الإيطالية. سوف لا أطيل لأعطيك الحديث دكتورة جيهان، نحن سعيدين بوجودك معنا، فتفضلي.
شكرا دكتور زكي، أنا كمان سعيدة جدا جدا بوجودي معاكم، وخصوصا إن أنا هتكلم بعد الأيقونة الدكتور منير بوشناقي، فطبعا ده حاجة مش سهلة. بس أود برضو إن أنا أشكر إكرام الشارقة، وبالأخص أخي العزيز الغالي ورفيق درب الكفاح الدكتور زكي أصلان على الدعوة الكريمة. وأنا مقدرة جدا لكل السادة الحضور والمحاضرات والمداخلات الرائعة منذ الأمس حتى اليوم، وأنا استفدت جدا حتى لو أنا يعني مداخلتي تحت مسمى الدبلوماسية الثقافية، بس هذا لا يمنع أنه مثلا العروض المتحفية وأهميتها، أو امبارح العروض طول النهار عن الأصالة والديفينيشن بتاعت او الجداليه ما بين الاصاله والمعاصره، ده موضوع طبعا في غايه الاهميه واثرى الجميع بالطبع. هل ممكن اعمل شير سكرين يا زكي دلوقتي؟
تفضلي طبعا.
اتمنى انه يمشي. فوالا جي انكور ان بروبليم. طب زكي ممكن شيرين تعمل لي انا البرزنتيشن عندكم؟ ممكن لو سمحت حد
شيرين ممكن تحطي العرض او شيفا؟
لحظة.
شكرا، لأني أنا قدامي دلوقتي دكتور منير. Je vous ai en plein écran et donc c'est de bon augure.
C'est un honneur pour moi, Jihan.
Merci, merci, mais je suis le disciple que j'espère voilà, à la hauteur.
Vous êtes trop avec moi, vous êtes trop aimable avec moi. Merci.
Merci, merci à vous.
شكرا.
شكرا شيرين. استني أنا عندي حاجة تانية. شيرين انت من عندك انت السكرين اللي انا شايفاه؟
ايوه هي من الاي تي اكسبرت عندنا. تفضلي.
اوكي. بس انا مش شايفاها لان انا عندي حاجه على السكرين.
يمكن لازم تعملي فول سكرين للزوم.
اوكي.
شيرين في تشوز ا ثيم انا شايف عندي.
اكزاكت.
شيفا
لا دي لا انا عندي زكي، انت عندك برضو سكرين كده بيضه وفيها
مظبوط
اوكي فيري جود.
هلا هيحطوها.
طيب على بال ما يحطوها انا هبتدي عشان ما نضيعش الوقت نظرا لضيق الوقت. شكرا كده. أنا بالنسبة لي النهاردة أنا هرجع شوية على اللي قاله رئيس مجلس الإيكروم الدكتور أوليفر مارتن على تعريف الدبلوماسية الثقافية. شكرا شيرين. وعايزة بهذه المناسبة إن أنا برضو أوضح نقطة غالبا بيبقى فيها تداخل ما بين ما يعرف بالدبلوماسية الثقافية والتعاون الثقافي. التعاون الثقافي هذا معروف منذ قديم الأزل ومنذ بداية التاريخ، وهو تبادل التاريخ وتبادل معرفة الآخر بين الدول وبعضها، وقد وقع ذلك منذ التاريخ الفرعوني وفيما بعد التاريخ اليوناني ثم الروماني. وحوض البحر المتوسط يعتبر مرجعية في مجال التعاون الثقافي، وهذا معروف جدا طبعا لكل دارسي التاريخ حول هذه الطاولة الكريمة. اللي أنا عايزة أقوله، ممكن ناخد السلايد اللي بعدها يا شيرين بعد إذنك. أوكي and then the one after. أيوة مظبوط كده هوت. إنه التعاون الثقافي هو عبارة عن جذور إحنا بنحطها، وفي آليات دلوقتي في الحكومات منذ نهاية القرن ال19 وخلال كل القرن العشرين وبداية القرن ال21. دي مسالك وقنوات أصبحت حكومية مقننة بتتبعها الدول، سواء عن طريق وزارات الخارجية الممثلة لها أو السفارات في الخارج، أو عن طريق الوزارات المعنية بالآثار والسياحة والثقافة، وهي معرفة الآخر أو تجويد معرفة الآخر والتقربة بين وجهات النظر. بس ده على يعني في الملفات والأيام العادية غير أيام الأزمات. أما عن أيام الأزمات أو الأوقات الدقيقة التي تمر بها الأوطان شكرا. ده لا تمام كده تمام. بالنسبة للكالتشر كوبريشن ده اللي قلناه، ده شيء احنا إلى حد كبير جدا كل سفارة بيبقى لها مكتب في الخارج أو بيبقى لها ممثل في الخارج بيعمل على تعزيز سبل التعاون مع الدولة المضيفة، وبعد كده بتتطور العلاقات تحت طبعا منذ عام 1946 تحت مظلة منظمة اليونسكو اللي هي وكالة الأمم المتحدة المعنية بالثقافة والتعليم والعلوم، ودي طبعا نقطة مرجعية مهمة جدا بالنسبة للحكومات. فيما بعد يا شيرين هناك ما يعرف، وهي يعني أنا اسمحوا لي أن أنا أصمم على أنها ممارسة، وبرضو كما قال صديقي وزميلي العزيز أوليفر مارتن أن هي أكثر ممارسة في أوقات دقيقة أكثر ما هو علم أكاديمي. حتى لو أنا نفسي حصل على شهادة عليا في الدبلوماسية الثقافية من جامعة سيانا، وأعلم جيداً أن هناك في برلين برضو فرع للدبلوماسية الثقافية، ولكن بعد ما شفنا مداخلة زي مداخلة الأستاذ الدكتور منير بوشناقي، بيتهيألي أن أي حد هيفهم أنه الدبلوماسية الثقافية هو وضع سياسي وأزمات سياسية يتطلب فيها تدخل رجال الثقافة. رجال الثقافة بيتدخلوا وكأنها رقعة من الشطرنج ذات إطار زمني وإطار مكاني، ويجب عليهم التدخل بين الساسة في كل من البلاد المعنية لحل المشكلة. وهذا ما يعرف بالدبلوماسية الثقافية. هي مصطلح من جزئين، الجزء الأول هو الجزء الدبلوماسي أي تقريب وجهات النظر يمكن أن يقوم به رجل من وزارة الخارجية، ولكن الخلفية الثقافية والتاريخية التي يفتقدها هذا الرجل في معظم الوقت فيتطلب أناس أو رجال لهم أولاً مصداقية وشرعية دولية ومعرفة وإلمام كامل ليس فقط بتاريخ الدولة ولكن التاريخ الإقليمي والتاريخ الدولي، لأن هذه هي ملفات ثقافية ذات خلفية سياسية تدار في أوقات أزمة. Next please. هذه طبعا صورة أنا يعني هعديها بسرعة، أنا حطها بس لتوضيح الصورة بين الثقافة وهي السوفت باور. أنا بفضل دايما أن أنا أسميها القوة الذكية، وأعتقد أن الزملاء أوليفر مارتن ومنير بوشناقي هيتفقوا معايا، لأنها تستلزم كياسة وحكمة في التعامل أمام رجل السياسة الذي هو همه الأول أن يستخلص مصلحته أو مصلحة دولته. next slide please. إيطاليا في الحقيقة كانت من إحدى الدول في نهاية القرن ال19 وبداية القرن ال20 اللي كان لديها منصات فنية. هذه المنصات الفنية تعتبر بداية لفكرة الدبلوماسية الثقافية. يعني إيه؟ يعني بمنتهى البساطة تقريب الشعوب بعضها ببعض، وما أجمل هذا التقريب إلا عن طريق الفنون، وقد ذكر زميلي أوليفر مارتن الفنون الموسيقى والسينما. هذا بالضبط ما فعلته إيطاليا بفكرة أكاديميات الفنون الجميلة، وهي الدولة الوحيدة في العالم التي لديها هذه الأكاديميات الفنية الأجنبية، وعددها 17 أكاديمية. السلايد اللي بعده. عندهم 17 أكاديمية موجودين، منهم أكاديميتين شرقيتين أي الجانب الشرقي من الكرة الأرضية. اليابان في منتصف القرن العشرين تم حيازتها لأكاديمية للفنون الجميلة. وبس تذكرة بسيطة إن هذه المنصات الفنية كانت في الأصل في نهاية القرن ال19 عبارة عن مجموعة من الفنانين التشكيليين اللي كانوا بيذهبوا إلى قبلة يعني الفنون، يعني روما هي قبلة الفنون طبعا وبالذات في القرن ال19، وبالتحديد في مكان اسمه فالي جوليا، المكان اللي هو يعتبر دلوقتي فيه تركيز لكل الأكثر من نصف الأكاديميات الأجنبية موجودة في هذا المكان. فبالتالي في وقت من الأوقات ابتدت الأكاديميات زي الأكاديمية الفرنسية والأكاديمية البريطانية إن هم يطلبوا إنه هذا الوجود الفني لدولتهم داخل إيطاليا يترجم إلى منصة أو مكان مقنن تعترف به الدولة الإيطالية ويحمل اسم الأكاديمية البريطانية أو الأكاديمية الفرنسية. Next please. بهذا الحزو بقى عندنا الأكاديمية اليابانية، وهي دولة شرقية في شرق الكرة الأرضية كبرى، والدولة الثانية التي تلتها سنة 1926 هي جمهورية مصر العربية، التي حازت على قطعة في فيلا بورغيزي في قلب هذا فالي جوليا. وطبعا تم إنشاء الأكاديمية المصرية للفنون الجميلة، وكان أول مدير لها هو يحمل البكوية، وهو لقب من الألقاب العليا الرفيعة في مصر ليثبت مدى أهمية الفنون والثقافة واهتمام الدولة آنذاك بهذا المضمار. وبالتالي أصبحت لمصر أكاديمية للفنون الجميلة منذ عام 1930، وهي ستحتفل قريبا ب100 عام على وجودها في إيطاليا. وتعتبر هذه الأكاديميات أذكر سواء المصرية الأمريكية الرومانية، أنا حاطة بس examples كده قدامنا أمثلة لهذا الوجود الذي كان لا يعرف آنذاك باسم الدبلوماسية الثقافية، ولكن هو بداية فكرة تقارب الشعوب عن طريق الفنون والثقافة بكل قنواتها. Next please. نقطة مهمة جدا اللي احنا بنتكلم عليها دلوقتي وهتلاقوها موجودة كتير جدا، هي branding for the country or marketing for the image of the country، أو how to promote the image outside the borders. طبعا الأكاديميات دي منصات جاهزة لهذا العمل، لأن حضرتك بتعرض من خلالها فنونك وثقافتك وكتبك ومنشوراتك العلمية والثقافية، وبتدعو أيقونات ورموز الحركة الثقافية المصرية والإقليمية لهذه المنصات، فبالتالي بيحصل عملية مد جسور تعاون مع الآخر. Next please. هذه طبعا ده كلام الجوينز اللي هي soul of the nation، بتعرض من خلالها روح هذه البلد أو هذه الدولة التي تتعامل عن طريق نافذة الفنون مع البلاد الأخرى، ليست فقط مع إيطاليا ولكن مع كل التمثيل الدبلوماسي الموجود في هذه الدولة. Next please. 2012-2013 تم شرفت بمنصب مدير الأكاديمية المصرية للفنون بروما. Next please. في أوقات طبعا دقيقة جدا، ودي أنا بعتز قوي بالكاريكاتير ده من التايمز، لأنه بيشرح كل حاجة، الأوضاع، حتى الأوضاع في العالم كله. هذا هو الهرم أوثوكراسي، وفي طبعا نزاع ما بين السياسة والدين. وطبعا هذا الصراع الموجود، وعايزة أقول إن هو ما هوش صراع اليوم، هو صراع اللي مذاكر التاريخ أو اللي بيعرف التاريخ الدولي يفهم إن هذا الصراع هو صراع أزلي ما بين القوة الدينية والقوة السياسية. طبعا في هذه الأوقات، أوقات الأزمات، بتبقى منصات مثل هذه بتعاني معاناة يمكن غير مرئية. هذه قناة أخرى ما أتلوها عليكم الآن، هي قناة مختلفة عما عرضه الأستاذ الدكتور منير بوشناقي، لأنه على الصعيد الإقليمي العربي وحصل طبعا هزة كبيرة جدا للعالم العربي بالربيع، بما يعرف بالربيع العربي، وكان يجب على هذه المنصات أن تكون بمثابة وزارة دفاع عن الهوية المصرية والعربية. بس طبعا لكم أن تتخيلوا أن مع حدوث مثل هذه التداعيات السياسية على أرض مصر أو تونس أو ليبيا أو غيرها، تم انقطاع التواصل أو شبه انقطاع تام للتواصل ما بين القاهرة وما بين إيطاليا، لأن أصبحت هذه المنصات ليست بالأهمية أو ليست بالأولوية في ما يحدث على أرض الواقع. فإذا أصبح على الشخص المنوط بإدارة هذه المنصات الدولية التعامل بشكل بما يراه أو ما يروق له لرد أو لعكس ليكون كمرآة تعكس هذه التداعيات ويجمل في نفس الوقت صورة وطن. Next please شيرين. 2013 طبعا ده كان وقت حساس جدا بالنسبة لأن هتكلم على الأكاديمية المصرية وعلى التجربة اللي أنا عديت بيها في مجال الدبلوماسية الثقافية. كان هناك منصتين مفتوحتين في نفس الوقت، كان هناك روما بوجود الأكاديمية المصرية للفنون، وكان هناك البينالي وهو أهم حدث فني في العالم يحدث ويفتح أبوابه يوم 30 مايو 2013. Next please. في حين كان 30 يونيو بدءا من شهر أبريل انقطع تماما التواصل مع وزارة الثقافة التي أغلقت تماما أبوابها، وأصبحت الدنيا في عالم آخر، عالم تشوبه السياسة والنزاعات والصراعات على أرض الوطن، وأصبحت انفصلت تماما روما وفينيسيا بالتبعية. فكان هناك ده من أحد التحديات التي أذكرها، وكانت فعلا من أصعب التحديات ومثل لما يعرف بالدبلوماسية الثقافية. جريت تواصل مع باولو باراتا رئيس بينالي دي فينيسيا اللي هو صديق شخصي للدكتور منير بوشناقي، وشرحت له الموقف، والفنانين كانوا موجودين، وقررنا ان احنا نفتح الجناح المصري كعادة مصر كل عام ونظهر إلى العالم في هذا الزي الذي يليق بالحضارة وبالتاريخ وبالفنون المصرية. وبالفعل خرج البينالي، وقام الفنان الكوريتور في هذا الوقت بعمل تصريحات في غاية الرفعة، تأكيداً منه على أهمية الثقافة والفنون والحضارة المصرية حتى في هذه الأوقات التي عبرتها مصر، وكانت فعلاً من أصعب الفترات ليس فقط لمصر ولكن للإقليم العربي ككل. Next please. تغيرت الأوضاع، وكانت لغة الحوار دايماً تؤكد على الشرق والغرب، على ضرورة الحوار، ضرورة التلاقي، على أهمية الفن إن هو يقدر أن يعني يحقق ما لم تحققه السياسة. وهذا طبعا دليل آخر يقوي من حجة ما قاله السيد أوليفر مارتن والسيد منير بوشناقي، أن أهمية التدخل الفني وحسن اختيار مفردات الحوار بين الأطراف هذا شيء مهم جدا ومهم للغاية، ويمكن أن يحول الأطراف السياسية من وضع لوضع آخر تماما، كما رأينا الوضع في موسكو مع البرزنتيشن السابق. Next please. التاريخ والماضي هو شيء مهم جدا، ويجب معرفة كيفية مخاطبة الدول الأوروبية. هي دول مولعة بالتاريخ المصري القديم، وكذلك تاريخ الحضارات الشرقية بما فيها بابل وعاشور وحلب وكل الدول ذات الحضارات القديمة. فكيفية مخاطبة هذه الشعوب خاصة في أوقات انقطع فيها تماما التواصل وأصبحت مصر على القائمة الحمراء للسياحة، فما كان علينا إلا أننا أحضرنا مستنسخات طبعا نظرا للظروف المادية والاقتصادية التي كانت يمر بها الوطن حينذاك، وأتينا به إلى قلب فيلا بورغيزي، وكان له أثر طيب ليس فقط على الكبار ولكن على الكبار والصغار، حيث فتحنا طبعا أبواب الأكاديمية إلى طلبة المدارس. هذا مثل حي لما يعرف بالدبلوماسية الثقافية. طبعا ضرب مصر فيما بعد الإرهاب 2014 و2015 والذي كان آفة العصر طبعا زي ما احنا عارفين، وكانت هذه أول زيارة بعد 2013 لرئيس وزراء أجنبي أوروبي إلى مصر تحققت عبر البوابة الإيطالية، وكان ذلك مزيدا من الفخر للأكاديمية المصرية للفنون بروما التي عملت على تحسين صورة مصر في هذه الآونة الصعبة التي تضاربت فيها الآراء حول ما حدث في 30 يونيو. Next please. هذا بالنسبة لما عانت منه مصر والمنطقة من تطرف استمر لمدة عامين بما فيه من حرق الكنائس وتداعيات أخرى للأسف كانت عطلت العجلة السياحية. في نفس الوقت اتكلمنا التعاون ما بين اليونسكو وبين منظمة الإيكروم بما أننا موجودين في روما، وبما أن أنا شرفت بأني أكون عضو المجلس التنفيذي مرتين متتاليتين، وهذا شرف كبير حصلت عليه لي بصفة شخصية وطبعا لمصر. وهذا كان نتاج تعاون مع الدكتور زكي أصلان، وبالذات أكتر واحد بما أننا بنتكلم على التطرف وآثار الدمار، كان معرض فوتوغرافي في منتهى الأهمية عن الدمار الذي طال الدول العربية وبالذات الدول المسجلة على قائمة التراث العالمي. Next please. ما زلنا نؤكد على اهتمامنا باللغة الثقافة ولغة الفنون، وندرس كل حتى في اتفاقية 2005 كانت الأكاديمية المصرية للفنون بروما أول من احتفل بمرور 10 سنوات على اتفاقية التعددية الثقافية أو التنوع الثقافي، لأن هذا هو الحل لكل ما نراه حولنا من تطرف ومن إرهاب ومن عنصرية نعاني منها حتى اليوم. Next please.
دكتورة جيهان، نقدر نستعجل شوية لأنه تأخرنا شوي على الموضوع الجائزة. طبعا ممتع جدا الحديث لكن الوقت المشكلة.
I know أنا عيني على الساعة أنا كمان I know. مشكلة برضو من المشكلات التي يمكنها أن تندرج تحت الدبلوماسية الثقافية، وهي مشكلات اقتصادية يمكن أن يتعرض لها أي دبلوماسي مسؤول عن الثقافة أو عن العجلة الثقافية في الخارج، وهي مثل مسألة في خلال أسبوع واحد حصل تعويم للجنيه المصري. وآخر حاجة أنا هقف عندها هنا هي مشكلة كبيرة وقطع العلاقات الدبلوماسية بين دولتين حميمتين لحادث مؤسف حصل بنعاني منه. كانت هنا دور الثقافة المصرية أن تداوي. هقفل على السلايد اللي جاية يا شيرين بعد إذنك. It will be my last one. كانت هي فعلا شبكة الاتصال أو حلقة الاتصال ما بين السياسيين لتحسين صورة التعاملات الدبلوماسية بين مصر وإيطاليا، وكانت هذه فعلا من أصعب المواقف التي تعرضت لها الثقافة. ولكن يمكن أن أؤكد في نهاية هذه المداخلة أن الفنون والثقافة كانوا هما الدرع الواقي لأزمات سياسية كبيرة تعرضت لها ليس فقط مصر ولكن الدول العربية، بما أن مصر كانت برضو منصة عربية، فرأينا من خلالها ومن خلال الإيكروم وتعاوننا مع الدكتور زكي أصلان كيفية إخراج منتج ثقافي يداوي أزمات سياسية وجروح سياسية ما زلنا نعاني منها حتى اليوم. أشكركم جميعا، وأود برضو أن أشكر الدكتور مؤمن على مداخلة سوريا امبارح، وفعلا هو عنده حق. الدبلوماسية الثقافية يجب أن تلعب دور مهم جدا في إخراج حلب من ما هي فيه الآن وكثير من دول عربية أخرى. شكرا جزيلا. شكرا دكتور منير بوشناقي، وشكرا لجميع الحضور.
شكرا جزيلا دكتورة جيهان زكي على هذه المحاضرة الرائعة اللي هي طبعا بنأكد فيها تبادل الثقافي وأهمية فهم الجوهر للتراث الثقافي والثقافة من خلال هذا الحوار. Let me now move to English, and I am very pleased and honored to introduce our last but not least speaker of the day, and we are very sorry that we are a bit late, and then after that we will start the award announcement. Please join me to welcome Her Excellency Ms. Manal Ataya, the Director General of Museums Authority. Ms. Ataya is a museum specialist with 12 years experience in cultural heritage conservation, museum development, and cultural diplomacy. As Director General of the Sharjah Museums Authority, she's responsible for the overall management of 16 museums in the Emirate of Sharjah. Ataya holds a BA in Studio Art and Communication Studies from Hamilton College and a graduate degree in Museum Studies from Harvard University in the USA. She serves several advisory boards, including ICRAM Sharjah. Ms. Ataya, we're so sorry for this delay, and we're very honored to have you, so the floor is yours.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much. I'm going to try to share my screen, and if I have a problem, I will ask Shireen. Thank you so much, everyone. And building on the previous presentations now on diplomacy, I think the meaning and the understanding of it is very clear. So I'm going to just speak about, particularly in this case, what cultural diplomacy means here in the UAE and what the UAE is doing in this regard, but particularly how museums are facilitating this. In the UAE, we have a number of institutions. Many don't know that the first museum was created in 1969, actually before the formation of the UAE in 1971. And since then, we have grown over 40 museums in the UAE, of course, with about 20 of those in Sharjah alone. And there are dozens of cultural foundations, societies, all kinds of cultural centers all around the Emirates, the different various Emirates, all trying to work towards better arts education, arts appreciation, to allow the community to feel pride in their heritage, their culture, their history, and also to share that with others. So what is UAE soft power?
Perhaps you should share the full screen. If you can
I'm
press.
sorry.
Yeah.
One
moment. No, it's okay. Everything is okay. But if you share the full, yeah.
There you go. Sorry.
Yes.
So the purpose of UAE soft power is really to do a few of these key things. One is really to position the UAE as this gateway to the region. It looks at how it can develop the economy, tourism, and media, etc. And one of the key things is also to establish the UAE as a regional capital for culture, art, and of course for tourism, which it has been very successful at. And finally, really to establish a reputation as a really modern and tolerant country that welcomes people from across the world. And this word tolerant, I just want to stress on, because tolerance is what's really goes together with this idea of peace building and of cultural understanding. And so they all play a part in this. What are some of the other sort of diplomacies that the UAE is involved in? Of course, it's involved in humanitarian, academic, cultural and media, economic, other things that, of course, we've mentioned before and that we're aware of. The quote you see at the top, which is cultural diplomacy is at the heart of any foreign policy, is a quote by Dr. Zeki Nusseibeh, who is the Minister of State for the UAE. And I believe this is very true. And in keeping with this idea, a lot of different or various different entities have been established over the years. I'm just including a few of them, a few key ones. That's the Ministry of Culture and Knowledge Development, which has been around for many years, the Ministry, of course, of Foreign Affairs, but some new ones have been the Office of Public and Cultural Diplomacy and the Office of the Minister of Tolerance, the UAE Soft Power Council, and the new Zayed Global Fund for Coexistence, which was announced last year. So talking now about how our museums are playing a part in this, Sharjah has a number of museums, just a quick view of them on the screen, ranging from arts, culture, archaeology, and heritage. We manage 16 of those, but there are more. And of course, Sharjah has many other cultural organizations and foundations, including Sharjah Art Foundation that you heard from earlier from Sheikh Nawar Al-Qasimi. So what are the key principles for our museums? The obvious one is education. We're there to provide extensive learning programs for communities, for schools, universities, learning, whether as a family, for fun, or for academic purposes. This part of social cohesion is one that maybe isn't as obvious, but of course we do a lot in community development. We look at how we can engage our community with different types of events, whether it's to raise awareness about environmental issues, or maybe take museums to marginalized groups that are not able to attend the museums, such as our program that we're doing now with inmates at correctional facilities in Sharjah. Now, the one at the end, which is peace building, is the one that isn't very obvious, but it is a very strong undercurrent to everything that we do, which is how our learning programs and how we co-curate our exhibitions and how we work with others and develop programs and provide those programs and those exhibitions to our public actually help in peace building. Because what they really do is they act as a way in which we can deepen understanding and our friendship of other countries, but also highlight our own nation's identity, our heritage, our culture, and also that of the other. So it's a reciprocal one. And we, of course, as I said, organize many exhibitions and programs that promote this and promote tolerance and, of course, multiculturalism. As well as actually a respect for diversity. One example I'm giving, because of the short time of this presentation, is an exhibition we did in 2014. I was asked to focus on this one. This was an exhibition with the Vatican Museum. It was the first of its kind. The Vatican Museum has never displayed its items outside of the Vatican in over 300 years and never in an Arab country. So we were the first in Sharjah to bring about 70 objects from all over, including Morocco, Iraq, Indonesia, China, and parts of Africa. So it's been it was a very beautiful exhibition, one that really highlighted Muslim material culture, which I want to focus on. Most people were not aware that the Vatican Museum had a lot of Muslim material objects, mainly ethnographic material. And we were able to bring this through the diplomatic ties His Highness has with Vatican City. Here are just two images. One below is His Highness with representatives from the museum looking at some of the objects that you can see a little bit in the showcase. There's some musical instruments and there's a beautiful kind of woven tapestry above. And then in the top photo is His Highness, again with one of the representative director of the museum, who's seated on the left. And then next to His Highness, the ruler of Sharjah, is the senior representative of the time for the Vatican. He's the Catholic bishop who is representative for this part of Arabia. These are just, again, closer images of some of the beautiful objects we had. Above is a beautiful jacket that's from Palestine. We have these boots from, I believe, from Niger, and then the small ceramic object is from China. I'm bringing this image of Pope Francis, who visited the UAE last year, because it was a very nice sort of full circle of the Vatican coming to the UAE for an exhibition back in 2014, which, by the way, was followed with a touring of that same exhibition to Australia in 2018. And then here we had a historic visit of Pope Francis to the UAE in 2019 with over 120,000 people who came for a public mass. So how do museums build peace? Very obvious. We provide the spaces for intercultural dialogue. We try to challenge prejudice or stereotypes through the kinds of images or artist works that we show. And we create these spaces for people to feel that they belong and they can talk to other people from the community and get to to learn more about them, so really enhance diversity. And finally, of course, act as a forum for these sort of unofficial or informal political relationship building opportunities. So some of the challenges, just to mention, is that when you're working towards cultural diplomacy, a lot of people limit this idea of what heritage or identity is. And I think it's important to always think about how our identities are very similar in many ways, and that we have a global identity, and there's a lot of multicultural exchanges with countries over, you know, thousands of years, and so we should focus on that. And also that we should really think about intercultural dialogue and peace as not as an outcome, but rather an interactive process. And this I can't stress on any more than that. And I think Dr. Munir Bouchnaki really focused on this process of dialogue and diplomacy. It isn't just something you can achieve as a goal on its own. In conclusion, that, you know, to really have effective cultural diplomacy, these are some of the things you need to do. You can encourage these discussions. You can explore and work with different types of collections. You can promote cooperation with different entities. And of course, remember that it's a long-term commitment. And just to end, I would like to quote again Dr. Zeki Nusseibeh, who recently said that really for cultural exchange can be a powerful antidote to the politics of division. And I think this is very important and very poignant at this time. There's a lot of division and conflict in the world today, and I think cultural diplomacy plays a key role in trying to mitigate that, minimize it as much as possible through all these different means that I mentioned, and of course, all the other means and strategies that were mentioned in the previous talks. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Manal Ataya, for this excellent presentation. In fact, you showed in practice how cultural diplomacy is being achieved through the excellent work of the Sharjah Museums Authority. I mean, the case of the Vatican Museum and this interchange of, that interchange and the exhibits that you have been developing in the past few years, I think are witness to the goals and the thinking that you have highlighted in this presentation that comes also from the UAE, of people such as Dr. Zeki Nusseibeh as well. Thank you very much. And I would like, by the end of this session, to thank all the speakers today who contributed with excellent information to this webinar. And as I discussed earlier with many of them, we will be looking forward to publishing the proceedings of this webinar, and we look forward to working with the experts to have their papers ready for a new publication.